Hello everybody, my name is Happy and I'd like to welcome you all to my history reaction channel. Well, the first time I did a reaction to Cunk on Britain, I did World War I through World War II and the intermediate period between them. Everybody seemed to like it. I had several people say they would like to see more, so I thought I'd go ahead and do a little more. That said, I figured we'd start with the beginning and beginnings. So that is the episode we're going to be watching. We'll probably watch most of the episode. I'm going to cut out the introduction and the outro, but we'll watch the bulk of the video. With that said, I'm not going to waste too much time on this. Let's just go ahead and get into it. And let's see how screwed up we can make history this time. And have some fun along the way. Here we go.
It's hard to imagine while you're standing in it, but there was a time before Britain.
Right.
Before Europe. Before the world. Even before the universe.
Absolutely.
Nobody can say when it was, because it was also before clocks
True.
and words. It was a time when nothing existed, empty, without motion or energy or light or hope, just like Plymouth today. Just imagine something like this orange, and then imagine it's not there. Then do that one by one with everything that exists until there's nothing at all. That's what Britain was like until the Big Bang.
All right.
The Big Bang created the universe in one mad explosion that was probably deafening, although luckily ears didn't exist yet.
Yep, that is probably pretty fortunate that we didn't have ears to hear it. However, I mentioned this in the history of the entire world, I guess. We still can detect energy from the Big Bang. It's cosmic background microwave radiation, and it is quite detectable. It is the echo, if you will, of the Big Bang.
Computers think it looked like this, although eyes also didn't exist back then either, so we
True.
can't be sure. And it was so long ago now, it's probably best not to keep dredging it up. Britain was
Fair.
already part of Earth, but it was scrunched in along with loads of other countries in a gigantic landmass called Pangaea.
Right, Pangaea from the Greek pan, all, Gaia, Earth.
At this time, Pangaea was full of dinosaur.
Okay, there's a problem with this. First of all, what we're looking at here is not the Mesozoic period. That is the age of the dinosaurs. This is actually the end of the Paleozoic. This is the Permian period, most likely. We're looking at Dimetrodon, for example, over here. We're looking at some giant insects and a lot of amphibian and reptile-like creatures. This is the period right before the age of the dinosaurs. And although Dimetrodon and some of these other critters you see here are related to the dinosaurs, descended from a common ancestor, they're actually more closely related to mammals than they are to the dinosaurs, believe it or not. Dimetrodon in particular is kind of halfway between a reptile and a mammal, and a lot of these guys here, not a lot of them, but several of these guys here are going to be in that same ballpark. So, Permian, definitely Permian, not Triassic, Jurassic, Cretaceous, not dinosaurs. There's probably a few early dinosaurs here, possibly, but they're going to be small, inconsequential. The age of the dinosaurs really takes off after the Permian extinctions.
A race of Godzilla monsters so scary, normal human beings didn't dare exist until they'd all gone.
Right.
Dinosaurs came in many flavours, just like kettle chips. As this actual footage shows, the main ones were the across ones who ate grass. And
So, Apatosaurus, Brontosaurus, Triceratops. Is this from the old, what was it, Land Before Time, perhaps?
the up and down ones who ate the across ones.
Oh, yes. I used to work in a museum that had a lot of these animatronic dinosaurs. Ours came from Dynamations. This actually looks like a Dynamation exhibit, but I don't know if it is. If it's in Britain, I don't know if they ever delivered or did work in Britain or not, but same concept. We still have a museum here in town dedicated to dinosaurs that has a lot of these in it, including T-Rex.
This tyrannical sawdust Rex is the only real dinosaur left in the world.
Tyrannosaurus, tyrant lizard, yeah.
which is probably why it's so angry, spending literally every waking moment of its life roaring helplessly at passing tourists. People wonder why the dinosaurs became extinct, although it's hardly surprising they died out when you see the barbaric conditions they're kept in zoos such as this one. Underfed, starving, some of them little more than skeletons.
But yeah, one way to look at it, I guess. It's pretty widely accepted now that they were killed by an asteroid impact somewhere down in the Yucatan. There is an iridium layer that can be found throughout globally, right between the end of the Cretaceous and the beginning of the Cenozoic era, the age of the mammals, that contained elements that can be traced to an asteroid. So that is almost certainly what ended up killing them off. There were other things involved. There's reasons why they died and other things survived, but that event is kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, if you will.
Luckily, the dinosaurs were soon replaced by different animals like me.
Yeah, that was not a dinosaur, that was a mastodon or a mammoth. I think it's a mastodon.
Man. But men like me didn't just appear fully clothed on the earth.
No.
Instead, we had to evolve.
We did.
Evolution is complicated, so we've massively slowed it down here so you can see it happening.
All right. You didn't massively slow it down, you massively sped it up.
This wasn't the only change that was happening. Pangaea was changing too.
Yep.
Over time, all the countries decided to split away one by one to work on solo projects, and Britain was no exception. Stone Age man used stones to make basic weapons and tools, like these hand axes. As well as boring, these are also shit by today's standards, but back then they were cutting edge, because they had a cutting edge.
True.
The Stone Age was all rocks, wasn't it?
Yes.
Are stones made of rock, or are rocks made of stone?
Both.
Yes.
A stone is a rock. Generally,
And a rock is a stone.
Yeah. Generally, rocks are more edgy, more ragged varieties of stone. The Stone Age lasted a very long time. In fact, our species spent more time in the Stone Age than any other. Let's think of it this way. If you look at the human history, prehistory as a year, and so New Year's Day is where humans start to use fire and shape stone tools. And this year is the last split second before midnight at the other end of the year. Then we're in the Old Stone Age until about 3 p.m. on the 31st of December.
Yeah, Stone Age is by far and away the biggest part of our history. And keep in mind that there were still cultures using primarily stone implements and tools right up until the recent history. So by far and away the longest period of human time was Stone Age, even if we discount the lingering stone users.
So rocks are more jaggedy?
Yes.
You could tell stone...
That's the one takeaway she had of that. That analogy was really not well done. I know what he was trying to say. It's a pretty common analogy, but didn't come across quite as well as I've heard it explained by other people.
Age stuff was precious because they kept everything deep underground. Why did Stone Age people bury all their stuff underground? Were they worried someone might steal it?
No, that's how we find it.
Yes.
It wasn't always underground. It was on the top. The reason we find it as archaeologists is that we go out and we dig it up.
Not a good explanation because no, it's not buried. It wasn't buried. It was on the top, but we go out and find it by digging. I think a lot of people will be surprised at how fast things can get buried in nature. Maybe you're not. Maybe you paid attention and you've seen it yourself. But when I was working at a paleontological quarry, the very first year I was working there, we did a couple of kind of informal experiments. We found the carcass of a bighorn sheep, and we kind of paid attention to how long it would take it to be scavenged and decay, so that we could get an idea how fast that can take place in that kind of environment that we were in. But we also paid attention to how long it took some things to get covered up by dust and dirt and sand. And it can be surprisingly quick. Something can disappear within months at times. So it's not at all surprising that wind, rain can move earth. When you have something that's sitting on the ground, especially if it's something that's heavy like a stone tool or anything like that, the wind-blown material or the water-washed material will hit up against it and get dropped, and that'll cause it to get buried pretty quickly. You really could. It's really kind of surprising how fast some stuff can get buried.
Oh. But not all Stone's Age things have to be dug up. Some are still visible, which means you can see them. This is Stonehenge, early man's finest achievement. To Stone's Age Britons, this was a cross between Nemesis at Alton Towers, in that it was a spectacular attraction, and the Q for Nemesis at Alton Towers, in that it never fucking moves. Stonehenge was used to tell the time, which means Stonehenge is the only clock you can see from space.
Well, that's an interesting way to look at it. I doubt you can see it from space, though.
Unless you have a clock in your spaceship. Eventually, primitive cave boffins discovered new materials. Early man dropped rocks like a stone and got into metal, bronze, and then iron. Iron Man was born. Iron Man didn't have superpowers like the Iron Man in films. He couldn't fly or tolerate Gwyneth Paltrow.
Okay, that was cruel. That was mean. That was uncalled for.
So instead, he had to go to lengthy measures to defend himself. Luckily, cave boffins had also invented the iron spike. And shortly after inventing the spike, they invented stabbing each other.
No. They invented stabbing each other with sticks, then stone tools, then bronze tools, and then iron spikes.
To make sure they stabbed the right people, Britons formed into primitive gangs called tribes. And like many gangs, they got into graffiti, vandalising the countryside with gigantic doodles, like this badly drawn horse, or this decorative pervert. Before Snapchat, hills were the most efficient way to distribute dick pics to a wide...
Okay, I did not need that mental image. Also, there's no way she's not standing right there on purpose.
...wide audience. As a result, this site at Cerne Abbas became the second crudest hill in British history, after Benny.
Benny. Yeah, I knew that was coming. My mother loved Benny Hill. He's definitely cruder than this.
There's disagreement about how old the Cerne Abbas giant actually is, especially since he's still young enough to get wood. What's not in doubt is that he represents the birth of British art, being the biggest example of a noble visual tradition that's echoed down the ages. But this happy land of...
What can I say? She's right.
...spikes and hill filth was about to come under threat from something nobody saw coming. Romans.
Yeah.
Where did the Romans come from?
To begin with, they came from Rome, and then they came from the Roman Empire.
Right, but where in Britain did they come from?
Not from Britain. They came from Rome, which is in Italy.
Right, well, this is about the history of Britain, so where in Britain did they come from?
Well, the Romans came from Rome, and they headed northwards and conquered most of Europe. And then they crossed the English Channel, and they conquered about half of Britain.
Yeah, so let's expand on that just a little. So, we do have account in Caesar's, Julius Caesar's Gallic campaigns of him invading the British Isles. His attempts are not very successful. In fact, they're not successful at all. He pretty much gets repelled. He does, however, if I remember correctly, I think it was in Britain where he reported seeing a unicornus, one-horned creature, a unicorn. Just an interesting tidbit from Julius Caesar's Gallic campaigns. I was in Latin class. We actually, for the second and third year, we had to translate the entire thing. So yeah, I don't remember a lot of details, but I do remember the unicorn reference. But yeah, Julius Caesar is the first to invade, but doesn't really achieve much. It's not until Claudius that they get a firm foothold on Britain. In fact, yeah, Claudius is the emperor that really gets a strong foothold there.
And where did they go once they were in Britain?
Well, they tried to get to Scotland, but they decided it wasn't worth the effort of going there.
Yeah, I felt that.
Yeah, the Scots were a little tough even for the Romans.
The Romans were so advanced, they came with Latin pre-installed.
Yes.
And they soon taught the primitive locals how to wash and walk on their hind legs.
I'm pretty sure they already knew how to walk on their hind legs, and they probably knew how to wash. But I doubt they had bathhouses and things like that. Indoor plumbing, rudimentary sewage, that kind of thing.
The Romans were fearsome in battle, but soon found themselves facing resistance from some British locals known as Celts. There was heavy fighting, although according to experts, it wouldn't have quite looked like this.
No.
Celts famously would, the warriors would strip naked, paint themselves in designs, and go into battle naked. They believed that by painting themselves in designs, that they were calling out to their gods up in the sky for protection and for courage and for help.
Did the Romans have chainmail then?
They had armour.
They had armour.
They had armour and they were naked.
Yeah.
Who won?
Well,
the Romans.
The Romans won in the end.
I knew it. I bet when the Celts turned up naked and saw what the Romans had on, I bet they were kicking themselves. I bet they felt stupid. I bet they were like, who suggested this? Having defeated the...
I don't know. I think a bunch of painted up naked men running at me with spears might be a little more intimidating. I'm not sure I could outrun them. I could probably outrun a guy in armor, maybe.
The Celts, the Romans set about revolutionising British life. They built Hadrian's Wall and put the capital of Britain in Colchester, where nobody would want to come and get it. They introduced coins and invented these primitive 8-bit computer game graphics that couldn't make them move.
Right.
What the Romans really loved was bathing, which is why they built this in the English town of
Bath. Yep.
No one in Britain had seen anything as sophisticated as these baths. You could think of it as an early example of gentrification, like when someone opens an artisan bakery in Hull. Imagine in ancient Britain walking into this place. He'd scarcely be able to comprehend what he was seeing. It'd be like Steve McFadden climbing on board Concorde. Perhaps most impressive of all, the Romans invented roads.
They didn't invent roads, but they definitely improved upon them. Roman engineering was top-notch. Roman roads still exist and are still used to this day.
Before roads was invented, you had to travel around by standing at the edge of your village and seeing how far you could jump. Despite all this, some people resisted the Roman invasion.
Boudica.
Queen Boudica came from Norfolk, like so many rebels. Myling Class, Ed Balls, Delia Smith. Boudica hated the Romans. She led a barbarian army in revolt and attacked Colchester, turning it from the bustling capital into a smouldering hellhole full of weeping and despair.
She also burned down Londinium. So, Boudica, she was as she said, a queen. Her husband had been the ruler. He was an ally of Rome, at least according to the Roman historians. I want to say, was it Herodotus and Tacitus, I believe? I don't remember exactly. It's been a long time since I did deep dives into Roman history, but in any case, there's like 4 written accounts of Boudica's rebellion, at least 3 of which I know are Roman and written a little bit after this time that it happened. So we don't really know a lot about it, and the details we do know are somewhat suspect since they are told by the Romans, and again, not firsthand, but later. But her husband was an ally of Rome. When he died, he left his kingdom supposedly to his heirs in his will, but Rome overrode that and claimed his land for themselves. At least that's the story. Boudica was flogged, her daughters were raped, and this led Boudica to lead a rebellion. And it was a fairly substantial rebellion. There were a lot of early victories by Boudica and her people. Like I said, they did burn down Londinium, they did attack what had been the capital at the time, they did kill a substantial number of Romans. Eventually, of course, she was defeated.
Which you can still visit today. Rome was the most advanced warfare machine on the planet, but Boudica's army fought back with the weapon they knew best, spikes. and lost because it's just spikes. Once Boudica was crushed,
Yeah, but they did surprisingly well in the beginning. In fact, they had Romans on the run for quite a while. It wasn't until the Romans were able to regroup, reorganize, and counterattack that things turned.
Romans ruled over Britain for years, until suddenly they had to rush home because they remembered they'd left a complete collapse of civilization on.
Yes.
Britain was left on its own. It had taken back control from the unelected bureaucrats of Rome and was free at last to explore its own proud destiny. And it did that by immediately entering the Dark Ages.
Right.
We don't know a huge amount about
All by plan and design.
what actually happened during the Dark Ages because the Romans had taken the last pens with them. That's probably why it became a time of myth and great heroes like King Arthur.
Notice that she mentioned King Arthur in the Dark Ages. The King Arthur that most of us think of with Camelot, the Knights of the Round Table, Sir Lancelot, and all of that, tend to be set in the High Middle Ages where you've got shining armor and castles and chivalry and all of that. But stories actually originate as stories of what they're calling here the Dark Ages, right after the fall of the Roman Empire in Britain. In fact, the only real evidence that we have for historical Arthur would have been related to the Roman period, the very end of the Roman period or the period beginning right after that. There are records of an Arturus Rex, but not much, very little evidence. So what we tend to think of as Arthur is radically different than, or we'll put it this way, the stories evolved into something very different than how they began.
King Arthur came a lot, didn't he?
No, he was from Camelot.
I think you mean that he's associated with the court of Camelot.
No, it definitely says King Arthur came a lot.
Camelot.
Camelot.
Yeah, it's his court where he held court. It's a place.
All right. But do we know if he came a lot?
He's just not going to let it go. I absolutely could not do what these experts are doing. I could not keep a straight face. I would, just by nature, want to play along with it, and we'd go so far off the rails it wouldn't be funny.
Or like just the same as an average man? Like about a tablespoon?
The only evidence I have in that regard is that he is said to have had one child.
That would be Mordred. She's trying so hard to keep a straight face. Yeah, he had one son, Mordred, not by his wife, mind you.
Right. So probably not.
Probably not.
Even though he didn't exist, King Arthur lived in a castle called Camelot, where he founded the Round Table, even though he didn't do that either. The Round Table was a sort of lazy Susan, which meant the knights could get at the snacks they wanted without having to move around in their armour. But
that's not what the Round Table was. Theoretically, it was round so that no one would sit at the head. Everybody would be equals.
But perhaps the greatest British icon to emerge during the Dark Ages was mega patriot and dragon slayer St. George.
Yep. St. George.
We don't know.
Who was not British, by the way, even though he's most commonly associated with Britain. But Britain's not even the only country he's associated with. The crest of St. George is also the... St. George appears on the crest of Muscovy, the state in Russia that eventually expanded into what we think of now as Russia. The original crest was St. George. They later, after the collapse of the Byzantine Empire, they adopted the Byzantine two-headed eagle, but they still put the crest of St. George on a shield on the chest of the two-headed eagle. Yeah, St. George, wasn't he, I want to say he was Middle Eastern, Turkish maybe?
Where or when George slayed the dragon, but we know it definitely happened because a bystander took this painting of the event.
Yep.
And it probably happened somewhere in Wales. It's one of the few concrete facts to come out of the Dark Ages.
Uh-huh.
Do we know for certain the dragon was threatening St. George? Or do we just jump to conclusions because of the way the dragon looked?
Well, the story of St. George killing the dragon isn't actually true because there are no dragons.
How dare he? There's no dragons left because St. George killed them. Duh.
After he killed the dragon, how was he rewarded? I mean, what's better than a saint?
Well, he didn't kill the dragon, because dragons don't exist. It's made up.
But is it true to say he was the greatest Englishman who ever lived?
The thing about St. George is that he wasn't actually English. His father came from the middle of what's now Turkey, and his mother came from Palestine, and he never actually came to England.
Oh, you're joking. But although St. George never bothered, lots of other foreigners did set foot in Britain, as it got invaded again and again.
True.
First by the Angles and the Saxons, and then by the notoriously brutal Vikings, who arrived from Denmark in longboats, wearing metal helmets which they'd somehow managed to pull over the terrifying skull horns that jutted from their heads.
Okay, first of all, no, they did not pull helmets over the skull horns that jutted from their heads, nor did their helmets actually have horns on them. That came straight out of Wagner operas. Very little basis in fact. If they ever had helms with horns on them, they would have been purely ceremonial. No warrior would wear something like that in battle where somebody could just grab it and yank them around with it. Really dangerous.
British King Alfred of Great fought the Vikings by giving up and letting them settle in York, probably because it had the Jorvik Viking Centre.
Right.
Soon interbreeding meant the Vikings lost their distinctive horns and became indistinguishable from normal humans.
For a few hundred years, Britain was relatively peaceful, until one day when a new king, Harold, was getting coronated, and Halley's Comet, a sort of very short firework display, appeared in the sky. The comet has always heralded great events. It last appeared in our skies in 1986, the same year the sitcom Brushstrokes started.
Okay, Halley's Comet. I remember when Halley's Comet came around. It did herald great events. It heralded my graduation from high school. Definitely a great event. At least I thought it was. I actually graduated. That was great. But yeah, it's one of those comets that comes around pretty regularly and got a long history of being associated with great events. A great example that I can think of is Mark Twain, the writer, was born right around the time Halley's Comet came, and he always felt that he was attached to Halley's Comet in some way. And when he was older man, he heard it was coming again. He actually said that he came in with Halley's Comet. He expected to go out with it, and he did die right around the time that it returned. But yeah, comets have always been portents of good or bad things, momentous occasions, so to speak. Ever seen it?
Because of you, these things I do. Because of you. Oh.
In King Harold's day, the comet was also a sign of terrible things to come. The year was 1066.
1066 and the Battle of Hastings are probably British history's two most famous events, so it's handy they happened the same year.
Harold had a rival. In the first example of an EU national coming over here to take British jobs, a Frenchman called William set sail to seize the throne and become king.
It's amazing to think that only 1,000 years ago this field was interesting, because it was here that Harold and William's armies met. There have been many battles in Britain's history, but we don't know what happened in most of them. The Battle of Hastings is different. We've got an accurate visual record of the whole thing, thanks to a quick-thinking bystander who took a tapestry of it. Despite looking like a Game of Thrones season finale drawn by an 8-year-old boy, the Baywatch tapestry captures the full force of the battle. It's just like being there, but in wool. Here's the Norman archers, steaming in on their blue horses.
Right.
Here's a sort of stick fight bit, some chopped up people down here. His head's off.
Oh dear.
You'll be furious about that. Some goose monsters in the sky looking
Right.
down. Some sort of lion thing.
I
up
can
here,
say it looks like a lion.
eating its own tail. Is that its bumhole? I think that's its bumhole. As you can see, Harold won when he triumphantly caught an arrow in his eye. Sadly, it wasn't enough, and he died soon after. No one knows why.
No clue.
This meant that the Normans were victorious. At last, William the Conqueror's name made sense.
William winning was like Brexit backwards. Britain was suddenly part of Europe, and that meant everything had to change. There were new castles, new cathedrals, even the Tower of London, and amazingly, all built by one man, Norman architecture. The new king wanted a list of everybody in the country, where they lived and what stuff they had. It became known as the Domesday Book and was very much the internet of its day. So is this the actual Domesday Book?
This is the actual Domesday Book, yes.
And it's usually under glass, isn't it, this book?
Well, usually it's not accessible at all, so it's very rarely on display. So this is really quite a special occasion that we've got it out for you to be able to see it today.
So you're not allowed to touch it?
No.
I thought that was because of the curse.
The curse?
Yeah, I heard that there was a curse on it.
I've definitely not heard that, so I don't think there's a curse.
I thought it was going to be like, you know, Raiders of the Lost Ark, where that Nazi gets his face melted off.
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be like that.
I'm afraid not.
So how does the Domesday...
You would have had to expect that was a book called the Doomsday Book, even though that's not how it's spelled. She sounded awful disappointed that her face didn't melt off.
Compare to a book like The Runaway by Martina Cole.
Well, I've not read The Runaway by Martina Cole, but
It's
I think...
really good.
OK, I think that's a work of fiction, so it's a made-up story, whereas Domesday is recording the land and landholding in England before the Norman Conquest and after the Norman Conquest. It kind of lists who holds land and what's within that land and how much it's worth, and it does that in a lot of detail. So Roger holds a land here it's just called Milderhope. It's probably going to have a different name now.
So how can we free the people living in this book?
Well, they don't live in the book.
But their souls are inside the book.
I don't think that's necessarily true. I think this records information about them, but they're not in there.
It's kind of sad, but a lot of our best records of the distant past, in terms of actual history writing, I should say, tend to be from books like the Domesday Book, which are either merchant accounts, accounting books, church accounting books, or government accounting books, which can include valuations for taxes, property holding, censuses, all that kind of stuff, especially before we get to the age of literacy and before we get to things like the printing press. Very few people could write. Those who could, writing was difficult. Writing materials were expensive, typically. So you wrote down what you needed to write down for specific reasons. And you'll find a lot of books like this that are often, and this isn't even just true for the distant past. If you're looking for your Irish ancestors during the potato famine, for example, I can't remember the name of it now, but there's actually the actual census records for the potato famine years were lost in a fire in Dublin. So the only real record we have is a land valuation similar to this, where they list who owned what land, that kind of thing. And that's one of the few ways we now have of trying to locate some of our ancestors during that period, other than, again, church records, parish records, where they often have records of births, baptisms, marriages, that kind of thing. So record keeping is one of our best sources, especially the further back you go.
It's just, it's just a record about them. It doesn't sort of contain their being or anything like that. We don't need to...
He's ruining a great story. I like Philomena's version better.
...to worry about them.
Are you sure?
I'm sure.
I'm sure.
The book gives us a unique insight into what life would have been like in the Middle Ages. In the medieval times, if you were lucky enough to be
The medieval times. Got it.
king, or a knight, or a lady with a pointy hat with all nets on it,
Right.
you might have lived somewhere like this. A castle. Castles were originally built by kings to protect their land and to sit in, whereas today they're mainly used as extortionate wedding venues. Of course, not everyone was a king. Everyone else was peasants. Peasants lived in thatched wooden huts full of chicken shit. The water was filthy, so everyone drank beer, and the only thing to eat was bread. It was a particularly challenging time for the gluten intolerant. But
Oh yeah, very terrible time if you were gluten intolerant.
Luckily, nobody was yet middle class, so they just put up with it.
Right.
But life for the common man was about to get better.
I know that was supposed to be a joke, but yeah. Gluten intolerance just kind of seems like it's more of a recent thing, if that makes any sense. I'm sure it's been around, but it's just something you didn't hear about until relatively recently, and then all of a sudden, everybody seems to be gluten intolerant. I'm not sure what's going on there. That's something I've been very curious about, honestly. Because it went from something that you never heard of to be surprised, because I used to work in a grocery store, how many people were looking for the gluten-free section. And a lot of times when I asked them, you know, are you gluten intolerant? They say, no, I just heard it was bad for you. No, that's something entirely different. Anyway, I've always kind of wondered about why there just seems to be so prevalent now, and for most of my life, you never heard it mentioned at all, ever. And bread has been the staple for ever. I mean, just for most of human history, or at least for most of human history since civilization began. Let me rephrase that. Back then, that was what you had. If you were gluten intolerant, you weren't going to probably live very long.
Better, thanks to the Magna Carta, a sort of terms and conditions notice King John had to sign
Right.
against his will, which limited his powers and gave citizens basic rights. The Magna Carta kick-started the whole of British political history, a history so complex, even experts can no longer keep track of it. What's the most political thing that's ever happened in Britain?
That's a totally unfair question. There is no answer to that, other than personal opinion.
I'm not sure. I think
I'm with him.
Gosh, that's a tricky question in the sense that there are definitely degrees of gosh.
I would say pulling Excalibur from the stone. That was the most political thing that ever happened. There, I'm decisive. I'm very wrong, but hey, I'm decisive.
What's the most political? So there are lots of things that are straightforwardly political, and then there are other things that are not. They're sort of halfway, I guess. But I genuinely can't identify the most political.
Second most?
Brexit.
Meanwhile, back in history, by the Middle Ages, medieval England was such a big deal. It was even happening in Scotland. The Scots have always been a proud, confident nation, ready to complain if they think they've not been given their own little section in a landmark history programme.
Right.
But in 1296, Scotland was reluctantly under the rule of English Edward I. One man wanted out, William Willis. No one knew what William Willis looked like until 1995.
William Wallace. Thank you very much.
1995, when Hollywood scientists discovered he looked exactly like Mel Gibson, who was coincidentally playing a Scottish Apache in a film called Braveheart, a sort of Scottish reboot of Dancing with Wolves.
Right.
That they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom!
Great movie, horrible, horrible history. If it gets anything right, it's purely by accident.
Sensitively informing modern audiences about a story little known outside Scotland, the film emotively and expertly depicted William as he gathered a band of noble warriors and defeated the English army at Stirling Bridge using face paint and extreme whittling.
To this day, the words Stirling Bridge conjure pride in every Scotsman's heart, while to an Englishman, those same words conjure up literally no feelings at all.
Right.
But his glory days weren't to last, and Willis and his men were defeated by the English at Falkirk. With Willis gone, a posh Scotsman called Robert E. Bruce thrashed the English at the Battle of Bannockburn and took the throne. Scotland would never again be under English control, for a bit. Willis, meanwhile, was eventually captured by the English and taken to London, where he was publicly hung, drawn and quartered.
Right.
This means he was hung by his neck. Then while he was still alive, his guts were chopped out and his body cut into 4 quarters. Something you can ask your local butcher to do to a chicken.
Once it had stopped
I did not need that mental image.
screaming, Willis's severed head was placed atop a pike on London Bridge, like a sort of gory Scottish Pez. Willis's execution kicked off a golden age of public entertainment. As well as watching people die painfully, popular pastimes included bear baiting, shin kicking and cockfighting, which isn't what it sounds like.
Actually, it is, but it's not what your dirty mind thinks, Philomena. Yeah, bear baiting was a real thing, so was cockfighting, and it wasn't just Britain. You had that in other places as well.
Even though I checked twice. But British culture wasn't just being cruel to animals, it was also bum jokes. And the William Shakespeare of bum jokes was Geoffrey Chaucer.
Oh, Chaucer.
His greatest work
Canterbury
was the Canterbury
Tales.
Tales,
Yep.
which everyone has pretended to have read at least some of.
His stories feature lots of bawdy shenanigans, a literary phrase which means knockers popping out, or things on.
Yeah. Canterbury Tales are interesting. I have not read the whole thing. I have read selective passages, but not much. A lot of pretty raunchy stuff in there. But I have read primarily, like I did, just little excerpts from it. And kind of interesting, too. Someday I do want to sit down and look through it.
Unexpectedly going up your arse, accompanied by a sort of swanny whistle noise. Chaucer's meant to be quite rude, isn't he? Could you describe a rude bit for me?
So there's a very famous scene where there's a woman, a very pretty woman called Alison, who everyone fancies, and she's in her bedroom with one lover, and then another would-be lover arrives at the window to serenade her and begs her for a kiss, and she sticks her arse out of the window, her naked arse, and he kisses that very enthusiastically, and then suddenly realises what he's done and is quite upset and runs away.
Right, that's not very rude, is it? Like, my mate Paul told me this joke about this bloke in prison who wore a bib round his backside. And that story went places I wasn't prepared for. Like, not even funny, just disturbing. And when I looked up, Paul was crying.
Okay.
But it wasn't all chuckles in the Middle Ages. In 1348, Britain was invaded again, but this time by a plague. Not a metaphorical plague, like a metaphorical plague, but
real
an
one.
actual plague.
Right.
Made of plague. The
The
Black
worst
Death
kind.
symptoms were disgusting. Discoloured buboes grew in the groin and armpits,
Bubbles, bubonic plague.
making even a light workout next to impossible. If you had sex with someone who had the Black Death, would you have to use a condom for protection?
If they had the Black
what your
Death,
major concerns were.
fair.
But you wouldn't be protecting yourself against infection.
How long would you get off work if you got the Black Death?
Permanent.
In about 70% of cases, you'd be off work forever
Oh, right. Result?
because you'd be dead.
Oh. Roughly half the population died, which statistically meant that if you wanted to save your loved ones, you'd have to die yourself. The Middle Ages started
not
like
what
a
that
fancy
means.
dress party and ended like Halloween. But once it had got its strength back and grown some more people, England descended into 30 glorious years of violent conflict between rival royal houses. The War of the Roses,
right.
which sounds like a sitcom about florists, but perhaps surprisingly wasn't.
Right.
This was an incredibly complex period of history, which is frustrating because we've got to get it out of the way in this episode, and we spent too long talking about Mel Gibson earlier.
Yes,
The
we did.
War of the Roses is a complicated struggle, but could you sum it up for my viewers in like 3 words?
Conspiracy, dynasty, war.
Could you do it a bit more thoroughly than that? I'll give you 10 seconds. Start.
It's a struggle to control England and the crown.
Yep, that's good.
I've got a few more seconds.
Between warring...
Stop.
Yep.
Perhaps the most violent...
Don't know a lot about the War of the Roses other than what she kind of said. I do know there was a war over who's going to have the crown. That's about all I know about it. Another area I really need to pay more attention to. So many. World is a big, complicated place.
violent event of the War of the Roses was the Battle of Bosworth, which
Right.
Richard III tried to escape
yes.
by burrowing under a car park. He had
That's not how he got there. He was killed in the battle there. He was found buried under the parking lot. It wasn't the parking lot at the time, I should hasten to add. But yeah, I remember when that discovery was made. Quite interesting news. We do know that he was deformed as depicted. but still a lot about him we really don't know for sure.
Down there for centuries, before finally emerging in 2013, by which point the war was over and he died of tarmac inhalation. Richard
Yeah, kind of see the deformity there.
At which point the war was over and he died of tarmac inhalation. Richard III may have died, but he gave birth to a series of celebrity kings and queens, the Tudors, very much the Kardashians of British history.
But that's a story that'll have to wait for now. Join me next time when I go back in time again. Not in an exciting way like in a film. I'm probably just looking at some old pots or something.
Right. Okay, I guess we're done. So that was fun. I hope I was able to add a little bit. I know more about ancient Britain than I do about modern Britain, and by that I mean Middle Ages onward. Kind of same with Russia. I'm much better at the Middle Ages and before than I am in what happened after. So that was fun, enjoyable. As always, she's crazy and I love it. And I'm really jealous of these experts that can keep a straight face dealing with her, because I know there is no way at all I would ever be able to do. I'm way too easy distracted to where if she started making silly comments, I would go on the silly bend myself, and we'd just feed off each other, and we'd end up on something totally unrelated really quickly. So, I couldn't do it. Anyway, thank you guys for joining me. I'll see y'all next time. Bye-bye.